is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us on WZRD via Zoom Carlos Torre. He's an alumnus of NEIU. He he's a professor at Yale University. He was a professor at NEIU. And your list of accomplishments is huge, Carlos. But what do you feel that is most important about what you have accomplished throughout your long career in education?
Oh, that's a difficult one. So many things to choose from. Let me say a couple of things without any particular order, but I have found that my time at Northeastern was even more important than my time at Harvard or at Yale. It really impacted me. It changed so many things in my life. Just the fact of going into education, for example, right from a young age, went out trying to change the world. And so eventually I went into sociology because I was going to change the world. And then I figured that sociology is only from the skin out. And what about from the skin in? And I said, okay, maybe psychology. And I went into psychology, human development, and combined that with education. And that to me has made all the difference. So many things have come together since trying to pull all of these ideas and all of these things in a way that, that is not piecemeal and that doesn't contradict the other, that one hand doesn't contradict the other. I would say that's probably, on the academic, on the professional side. On the personal side, the friends and relationships and the family that I've had, I think it's just been incredible. I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have come across and been part of some of the people with whom I have shared this life. Sometimes it was very trying, and eventually I think that helped the learning and the understanding. Sometimes it was just simply joyful. So it's a combination of so many things. It's difficult to just say, this is one thing that stands out above everything else.
You have done a lot of research on education. What was it in your background when you started at Northeastern Illinois University NEIU? What was it driving you? And then I know that you were you advocated for Puerto Ricans and people of color. But what was it that put the two and two together that made you go into education? Was it to find a solution of something that of a problem that you felt needed to be resolved?
Well, let me see. I guess it started my first day in school in the United States. I was born in Puerto Rico, and I came to the United States at about the age of 8 or so. And even though I was already in second grade, because I didn't speak a word of English, they put me back into first grade, which was somewhat traumatic, for an 8-year-old child. And it just, so much conflict and so much clash with what I was used to in Puerto Rico. For example, on my very first day, I made friends with a Mexican-American boy whose name was James. And when we all went to lunch, I had to go to the bathroom. So I went to the bathroom. Everybody else was at lunch. And so when I came out, I was a bit lost, even though I had some idea where the lunchroom was going to be. And so I hesitantly walked in because it was in total silence. And I couldn't understand what the heck was going on. Am I in the right place, or did I walk into somebody's morgue? Total silence. And I spotted James sitting at one of the tables, and I'm going toward him, and I'm talking, because in Puerto Rico, that's what you do during lunch. It's the time to let chaos fly. It's the time to have fun. It's the time to yell and scream and run. And so I was walking toward him, and the closer I got, the bigger his eyes got. He was scared to death. And so when I got really, and then all of a sudden, out of my left side, I could hear somebody screaming something over a PA system. And eventually I figured out it was no talking, no talking. And I had no idea what they were saying. So I'm getting close to James, and his eyes are bigger and bigger. And no talking, no talking. And to a Spanish speaker whose first day in the United States hears no talking, it sounded very much like the Spanish phrase no toque. No toque, no talking. It sounded essentially, and in Spanish, no toque means don't touch. So I looked at the person with the PA system, and I said, pero no estoy tocando nada. I'm not touching anything. And she just kept screaming, no talking, no talking. And finally, I looked at James for some kind of orientation, and he looked at me, and he was scared to death. And I hope he eventually went into ventriloquism, because what he did was amazing. Without moving a muscle on his face, he looks at me and he says, cállate, shut up. La cosa es contigo. She's talking to you. Quiere que esté en silencio total. She wants you to shut up and be in total and eat in total silence. And I said, holy geez. And, in retrospect, the line I made up for telling myself was, I guess I'm not in Kansas anymore. Right? This is weird. How is this possible? And I said, if this is what we're going to put kids through and we call it education, there is something wrong here. Now, as an 8-year-old boy, I just felt that there was something wrong, and there was this tendency to want to feel that there was something wrong with me. But fortunately, I had spent the first 8 years of my life in Puerto Rico. And so I knew that I wasn't the bad person that I was, being made to feel. And I knew that you could do things differently, and I knew that they worked, even at that young age. So that just kind of started putting, a dampener on education. And eventually, all kinds of other things happened. And at some point I said, this is not education. This is schooling, right? They put us through school to keep us out of the work market. They're putting us through school in order to turn us into obedient little kids who become obedient big people. And it's a way of controlling. And we think it's normal because everybody goes through it. And I said, no, I want to do something differently. I want to put out there the kinds of things that I feel need to happen. And eventually I started looking into where does this all come from? Have we always lived this way as human beings? And I realized, no, as hunter-gatherers, which we have been, if you count the Neanderthals and all the other human species before us, we've been hunter-gatherers for about 2 to 2.5 million years on this planet. As Homo sapiens, 350,000 years, right? But that's quite a bit. How did things begin to change? They began to change with agriculture. And agriculture just changed just about everything. And it's not just agriculture in and of itself, but it's the kind of agriculture. It was private property agriculture. because a lot of native groups around the world have agriculture, and there is no such thing as private property. Everybody works collectively, and whatever there is, everybody shares in one form or another. But when all of a sudden you decide that, no, this is my land, this is better land than the one you got, then I need to call it mine. And I work it, and I can't leave it, because if I leave it, somebody else will come and take, whatever I planted there. And so I can no longer go back to that cave for protection at night. I have to build a shelter there. And that shelter then becomes mine as well. And now I want to have a family, I want to procreate, so I need to have a woman. And that woman then becomes my property as well. Just like the land is my property, the house is my property, and the woman now and the kids that come out of that are my property. And I'm going to brand them like you do cattle, in order to everybody knows that they're my property. How does a man brand a woman and kids? The last name. Why is it that women have to take on the man's last name? Why can't it be the other way around? Or why can't they come up with something, a combination? Or why don't just everybody keep their name? That sort of thing. And so looking at this and looking at the relationships, I said, wait a minute, this is all wrong. This is all wrong. There's got to be a different reason why we are being schooled this way. And essentially, that's what has driven me for most of my my work in education and other areas in society.
Where were you when you attended your first day of school?
Chicago.
Okay.
You've heard of that city, right? It's
Yes.
used to be the second largest city in the country. I was
Mhm.
in Chicago. As a matter of fact, I was in a Catholic school known as St. Joseph's, right there in Chicago. And from there, I went to another Catholic school known as Gordon Technical High School. Now the school is still there, the building is still there, but as of about 5-6 years ago, Gordon Tech no longer exists. It was sold, I guess, by the Congregation of the Resurrectionists, who had it, to Loyola University. Now it's Loyola University High School or something like that. It's still on California. I believe it's 3200 California. And there I also got into so many other things and that didn't make sense to me. And one of the things I did was to join the newspaper there. But I did not want to join the news part of the paper or something else like that, because then I'd have to report what was happening out there. And that's good in and of itself. But I wanted to say some things. So purposely, I joined the editorial staff of the newspaper so I could say all kinds of things. And one day the principal dragged me into his office and he said, young man, do you believe what you wrote in this article? I said, yes, sir, I do. And he says, then maybe you don't belong in the school. And I said, sir, I agree with you 100%. But the law and my mother says I got to be here. So we're stuck with each other. Right. And then when I went to Northeastern, I already had that background with the newspaper. So when the Union for Puerto Rican Students got together, I was one of the the founders of that. I was a co-founder of that. And we decided that we needed some kind of vehicle to get our message out, to recruit people, to inform and that sort of thing. And I suggested a newspaper. And that's when Que Onde Sola came into existence. And it's still there after, I believe now it's 51 years.
And how were you able to get support for Que Onde Sola from the administration?
Well, with the administration, it was always more than uphill. It was always a struggle. And some of us decided we weren't going to take that, and so we we fought back strongly, not physically, but with words, but with actions. I still remember some group of students got together, took over the university president's office. We had a confrontation with the counseling staff. One, as a matter of fact, the director, I don't remember her name at this point, but the director of counseling told us that we were making her feel bad because she was a counselor. And as a counselor, she should be able to counsel, advise any and all students. Why did we want to have a Latino advisor? Why did we want to have, Puerto Rican faculty and so on and so forth? And I wouldn't have done this, but I'm so glad he did. One of our members just looked at her and it says, "I don't give an F if you feel bad, because we've been feeling bad all of this time." And he just brought it down one point at a time. And at the end of that, she had to be quiet, and decisions were made to get a Latino advisor and counselor. And from that point on, because we kept on with that sort of pushing forward, then we got the money for Que Onde Sola, and we got all kinds of other things, including El Centro and, in the community. And we got all kinds of other things that were going. And the thing was that we did not stop. The tradition has always been to give you either resistance, and if resistance doesn't work, they give you tokens, they give you pittance, to keep you quiet and to say, well, you got something, so shut up. But even when we got resistance, that they found out that was the wrong thing to do, to resist the kinds of things, because we were making plenty of sense. And so when they gave us pittance or token, we would take the tokens and we would thank them, and then we would continue to ask for what we thought we needed, and we never stopped. And that's how we were able to do all of that stuff. We got use of Northeastern used to have these station wagons. I didn't see them last time I was there, and maybe that's no longer a thing, but they were state station wagons. They looked very official. They were all white, and they had a huge state emblem on the doors. So it looked like if somebody had told you that the president of the US was being escorted by one of these things, you'd believe it, because they look so official, right? And we found out that we had the right to use those, and we did. And we set up activities, and the Chicago police would be surprised when they saw us in these vehicles, and they knew we didn't steal them, because we were, just there doing these things boldly. And so when we started filming them, they started filming us. And all of that commotion was taking place. So that's basically it. I don't know, I'm going on and on. So
Oh, no, it's actually very interesting, because of the situation that you first described to us with when you were in first grade, second grade. It seemed like as if it was a prison, and
yeah,
then it seemed as if you were trying to find, why would education be like a prison? What are they trying to contain?
yes.
And when you try to when you got KO on the solo running, and they gave you all these uh, perks, what
Mhm.
would they ask? What were they asking in return?
To be quiet, to shut
Mm,
up, to stop asking, to be happy with what you got, and to get out of their hair.
mhm.
But we didn't, no matter I mean, we were always graceful and thankful and so on and so forth. But we just didn't stop. We did not. Like I said, if we got any kind of perks, we thanked them for it, and then we continue. But what we thank you so much. This is so important to us. But what we really, really need is XYZ.
Mhm.
And yeah,
And so what was the XYZ, and how much of the XYZ did you get?
we got pretty much everything. At one point, I can dare say that we essentially took over the university. We got professors, we got courses, we got counselors, we got the student organization, we got the newspaper. We just went down the list of all the things that we felt. We got a center in the community itself as a kind of an outreach.
And the name of the center for our listeners?
Uh, well, actually, there are several things. As one of them we just simply call El Centro, the center.
Mhm.
And then there was Aquí estoy, which in Spanish translates to "Here I am." I never liked that name because it just sounded so wimpy. Here I am, do something with me. You know, uh,
Mhm.
but it was an outreach, and we got another one, and I'm blanking totally out of the name of that particular one. It was one of the more important because it was to try to see how we could get people from the community to think about going further in their education and maybe eventually ending up at Northeastern, something akin to the Uptown People's Field Center,
Right.
which I later became a part of. Now, the Uptown People's Field Center was more the Appalachian students and some African American students and so forth, and they got that center, and we kind of were going along similar lines of that sort of thing. And I still remember that the students themselves within the Uptown People's Field Center organized very cultural parts of it. For example, one of them was called the Dew Drop In. It play on words. Dew drop, like a drop of dew in.
Mhm.
Dew
Oh.
drop in.
Mhm.
And that was Appalachian students trying to create an environment similar to their homeland and the hills and the mountains and that kind of friendly atmosphere and family and that sort of thing. And I mean just the name itself, I guess, gives you cozy feelings. The do drop in, please drop in, come on in, that sort of thing. So those were the kinds of things that we were going after, and little by little we got them.
It seems as if one of the most important goals is for you is to find how the way to understand how education could work better. And what have you been able to find? I've read part of your paper on shared accountability and how conflicts always arise, and you've seen that throughout your life. So what can we do in shared accountability and better education?
Well, that is still an ongoing thing. As a matter of fact, right now I'm in the process of writing a book, and that's all coming back. That's all being reorganized and so forth. But the shared accountability one, that was a chapter in a book. And the idea is that, we give lip service to all kinds of mottos and sayings. Sometimes we don't even know where they come from, such as "it takes a village to raise a child." Nobody knows where that comes from. Hillary Clinton says it comes from an African proverb. Somebody else says it comes from a Native American proverb. But it doesn't matter because it is a good thing to follow. And so the question is, if you really believe that it takes a village to raise a child, how come only teachers seem to live in that village? Because they're the only ones who get asked to do everything. They're the only ones who get blamed for everything that's wrong with education, right? And what about the parents? What about the community? What about the administrators? What about the students themselves? What about, the the politicians? What about all the other people? What about that village that it takes to raise a child? Only teachers, seem to get it all this responsibility thrown on them to do. And so that chapter was essentially trying to figure out, okay, so how do we bring all of these people together? How do we bring and create a different learning environment, a real learning environment, not schooling, not just to keep them busy. And we did some of that in New Haven, Connecticut, because I was a member of the Board of Education here for 22 years, and I was its president for 17 of those 22 years. And we actually created a way of bringing together all of those individuals, all of those players that it takes to raise a child. And we did that for about 3 years. Again, because of politics and money and all kinds of things. And you have to prepare yourself to get resistance, because when you do something different like that, that's stepping on the toes of people who would like to see it be the way that it is. And so there will be all kinds of pushback. And I consider ourselves lucky that we lasted as long as 3 years doing that, because generally that's kind of either not allowed to happen or it's squashed within the first year and so forth. And we were able to last 3 years, and a lot of it still goes on, right? So the program in and of itself, the shared accountability, doesn't exist as an official thing, but people learn from that, and people begin to expect that there is more responsibility than just telling the teachers what to do and blaming them for whatever goes wrong. And there are many things like that. See, going back to the hunter-gatherers, one of my key foci, if you will, is to see how people learn naturally, how we are built biologically in order to learn, in order to survive. And what is it that helps us learn, and what kinds of things prevents us from learning? And especially with industrialization, when everything becomes linearized, you start talking about procedures as opposed to processes. You start talking about ringing bells like a factory, and isolating knowledge one part from another. Put away your history books, now it's time for math. Put away your math book, now it's time for geography. And those are all things that are so incredibly isolated from each other, when there is essentially, nature is nature. It is all interwoven. It all comes together, and there is no such thing as, let's say, for example, if you want to understand the machine, you take it apart and you find out that it's got bolts, it's got nuts, it's got levers, it's got this, it's got that, it's got grinding wheels, whatever. But if you try to take apart a living entity, you kill it. You cannot take it apart. You can't take the brain out and examine it. isolated from the rest of the body. You can't do that with the heart either, right? And sometimes we do with artificial hearts, keeping them alive temporarily and so on and so forth. But it's got to be holistic. It's got to come all together. You've got to learn all of this. And one of my favorite metaphors is that of the elephant. You might have heard this this metaphor that X number of blind people want to know what an elephant is, right? But they can't see one, so you just can't show it to them and see that's an elephant. So you bring them to the elephant and they touch the elephant. But unfortunately, they can't all be in the same place at the same time, so they touch different parts of the elephant. And then they describe it, oh, it's a boa constrictor because they touched the trunk, or it's a swish broom because they touched the tail, or it's a prickly wall because they touched the side, or a humongous butterfly because they touched the ears, or a piece of modern sculpture because they touched the tusks, or a tree because they touched one of the legs. Now, they're all absolutely correct, but they're highly incomplete. And so you start arguing, no, an elephant is a tree. No, an elephant is a butterfly. No, an elephant is a tree trunk, is a swish broom. An elephant is a piece of modern sculpture. We get into these stupid arguments because we isolate things from each other. I think you need to create learning environments that bring it all together. One possibility among many is gardening. If you can bring gardening into the public schools, especially the early grades, kids will see the interrelatedness of all of these things. And then you can no longer just describe a tree as here's the bark, here's, the trunk, here are the branches, here are the roots, here are the leaves. That doesn't tell you what a tree is. You'd have to start understanding how, the tree has its roots, and those roots give life to all kinds of animals and bacteria and whatever else underground. And you have fungus on those roots, and that fungus allows the root to suck up water and nutrients. You kill the fungus, you kill the tree. And then, the tree serves as a home for birds and other animals and insects and so forth. And there's this interaction. And how is it that the tree will shed all kinds of its fruits, but only a few of them become other trees? Is this just a big waste? No, because those fruit on the ground feed animals, right, who come by. And that tells me more what a tree is than telling me about the trunk and the bark and the roots and the branches and the leaves. That's meaningless. It's just a bunch of pieces. What does it do? What is it? You don't know what it is by looking at the different pieces.
Well, it seems as if when the different pieces argue, such as what you described about the different blind individuals feeling different parts of the elephant, it seems as if the people that are in conflict with each other are preventing the whole from reaching its goal, let's say to educate our kids better. Have you found any solution as to how conflicting groups could come together, could act as a village? How could we overcome these conflicts?
Well, that's part of what we did for those 3 years with the shared accountability process. You have to have some guidance, but then you have to allow people to do what they know how to do best. I'm reminded of one of the best-selling books ever until fairly recently. Matter of fact, at the time of its publication, it was the second best-selling book, second only to the Bible. And it was Dr. Spock's baby book on how to raise kids. I remember the very first sentence that he wrote in that book. And he said, word for word, you already know more about parenting than you think you do. Right? People know all about this. It's just that it has been either deadened in us or kept from our consciousness because we know it intuitively. How to come about and collaborate with your kids, collaborate with other people. How can you help your kids collaborate with other kids, with other people, that sort of thing. But you have to allow people to actually do that. You just can't structure it in a way that you impose what people are going to do. And oftentimes the programs we pull together, that's what they intend to do. All right, we know this works better, and this is the way we're going to do it. You are going to do X, Y, Z, and you're going to do A, B, C, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't work. That will never work. There are many examples around the world of schools that have got it much, much better. I'm not saying got it right, but got it much, much better. For example, there's the Summerhill School in England. In the Summerhill School, there are classes, but students do not have to go to class, ever. They can stay in the room, sleep all day if that's what they want to do for 10 years, right? But what's at play here is that human beings, our very nature, going back to the hunter-gatherers, our very nature is that we need to explore, we need to know, we need to understand. We're curious. And so maybe the kids, because of the environment in which they're being brought up, say, oh, fantastic, if I don't have to go to class, I will stay in bed, for the entire year. But at some point, their curiosity gets the best of them, and they see other kids having fun, doing stuff in science, doing stuff physically, in the forest, climbing trees, whatever, and their curiosity gets the best of them, and they start joining. And that school has been around for 102 years.
With always a similar philosophy?
Yes, 102 years. Now, here's an interesting fact, and that is that the current principal is the daughter of the founder.
Oh.
So how can the principal 102 years later be the daughter of the founder? Right? She must be like, over 100 years old herself. No, the founder had her when he was in his 80s or something. And so she is still the principal there. And then there is the Sudberry Valley Schools that started in Sudbury Valley, Massachusetts. And there are variants of that around. I think it is an interesting approach. I like Summerhill better. Sudbury Valley Schools have no classes. The Summerhill has classes. You just don't have to go. And to some extent, that's almost like the Oxford University model. Because at Oxford, there are no classes. You come in, there is a professor who maybe gets assigned 10 students. He invites you to a pub and he says, okay, so John, what do you want to learn? And you tell him and blah, blah, blah. And he says, okay, let me recommend, read these 10 books. And there's this professor from Japan who's going to be here for a year and he's doing some lectures. I'd like you to attend those lectures. And there's another professor who has a lab who's doing XYZ, volunteer in there. And then when you think you're ready, just give me a call and we'll come back and we'll discuss. And they'll never be told, oh, you suck. That doesn't, you didn't learn anything. What the hell do you think? No, they say, okay, well, you got X, Y, and Z, but you still have some other issues here. Let me give you another 2 books and let me ask you to also join this other laboratory or whatever. It's a natural way of learning. If let's say, going back to hunter-gatherers, if I'm going to teach you how to hunt buffalo, and I have a whole group of people, maybe 10, 15 people, mostly kids, and I'm teaching you, but it just turns out that you really suck at it for the first 3 weeks. Everybody else more or less got it. But all you do is keep shooing the buffalo away, and we're getting hungry here. But suddenly in the 4th and 5th and 6th week, you become our best hunter ever. What am I going to do? Give you a C? Because you sucked at the beginning and then you aced it at the end? No, but see, that's part of the structure that holds us back from really learning and from giving incentives to learn. When in my classes, for example, a lot of students don't believe me at the beginning. They say, what the heck? I give them, there's several assignments, but one of them I call a student-originated term project. And when they say, what do you want us to do? I said, I don't want you to do anything. What I want you to do in this thing is to do whatever the hell you want to do. Study whatever you want to study. If you want to look at the pattern of ants walking on banana leaves, go ahead and do that. I just have 2 conditions. One is that whatever it is that you go out to do, you connect it somehow back to education. And tell me how that improves education, that helps out, etc. And the second condition is that you got to have fun. If you don't have fun, you did this project wrong, right? Because I want you to follow your curiosity. I want you to really go out there and do, here's your opportunity. Somebody's offering you the time and the motivation to go out and do what you've always wanted to do, and you're going to get college credit for that, right? So have fun in the process. And it's amazing. At first, I kind of doubted myself. I said, geez, I wonder what I'm going to get out of this. I will never give that project up, because the kinds of things that comes out of there is just, it amazes me, right? And that I'm glad for, because as an educator, I still want to be amazed. I don't want to be repeating the same old thing, year after year, and just that sort of thing. So.
So it seems as if with just a little bit of guidance, then the students will take the initiative to learn. So when students don't learn that well, is it because of there are too many restraints? For instance, No Child Left Behind, it seems as if the program, at the end, a lot of children are left behind because they're not using what you described. Is that the one of the major causes of that?
I would say that it is all of this pathological structure and needless structure, right? Standardized testing, I think, is horrible. Why? And then trying to get them to learn stuff that is useless in their lives. Why would you want to? You're killing their motivation. You're killing their creativity. One of my pet peeves is when I was in middle and high school, everybody was trying to teach me till they were blue in the face and I was blue in the face, how to figure out at which point 2 trains are going to collide if they're coming in opposite directions on the same track at different rates of speed. Now I can see, that those would be useful concepts to understand. But why give me something like trains? In my entire life, I've never had to use that. And if I went out to try to learn all those concepts and formulas, I did it to get a grade, not because I thought it was going to be useful in my life. But, tell me how I can catch up to the idiot who cut me off on I-95 going at 90 miles an hour while I was doing 65. What do I have to do to catch up to him to tell him a few things? That might be of interest to me, right? Because I can see that some usefulness in that. And I'm exaggerating to make a point. But education has got to be relevant. It's got to be useful. Otherwise, it's meaningless. Another quick example, say, if I'm a science teacher and I want to teach you about centripetal force, okay, and I give you all the formulas and I explain all the theory and all of that, it's just going right by you because you're not able to make sense out of that, and you don't know how that may connect to you. So I tell my science teachers, don't teach them any of this stuff. Take them to Six Flags. Take them to an amusement park. Put them on the tilt-a-whirl. Put them on the roller coaster. Put them on that barrel that spins around and you get stuck to the wall and then the floor drops out from under you. And then they'll rush out and they say, Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, how come I didn't fall down when the floor went out from under my feet? Now that kid is motivated to want to know that concept, to want to know that formula. If he has to learn a formula in order to understand how that happened, I want to learn that formula because I want to understand. But, just putting all of this stuff and teaching of language. I think it's horrific the way we teach language the way we do. It's a second language, and for most people, and you take them into a room and you give them grammar and you give them sentence structure and you tell them about syntax. What the hell do they care about any of that? I just want to talk. I want to communicate with you in French or in Laotian or whatever it happens to be. Teach me how to talk. If we treated little kids the way we treat people trying to learn a second language, I can almost guarantee that all of us would be mute. We would refuse to talk because this is stupid. I don't want to learn about a structure of a language and I want to talk. Once I'm talking, maybe I'm interested in, why do I say red car instead of car red? Right? That at that point, it makes sense to me. But no, we have to continue. I know, with my own kids, some of them have taken French for 3 years. And when they were little, I would play with them and I would put my finger like on a gun to the temple. And I say, how do you say good morning in French? And they say, Dad, you're going to have to shoot because I can't remember to save my life. Right? Bonjour. Right? But the way that it's taught, you can be there for years and not learn anything. And one last thing. There was a professor, I won't mention the name, at Northeastern while I was a student there. I was doing a research project and I rushed into her office and I started speaking in Spanish. And she looked at me and says, no, whoa, slow down, stop. I don't speak Spanish. And I said, but you're a Spanish teacher. You're a professor of Spanish. How can you teach Spanish if you don't speak Spanish? And she says, I teach grammar. I teach this, I teach that. That I know. And I'm saying, holy geez, what the hell are we doing in the name of education?
Right. There's people are kind of like being siloed and kept from their potential. So how are we? Have you you've seen that these conflicts and these these preventions of from keeping keeping a student from actually learning. At least you have two examples of schools that have helped students learn better. What happened with students from those schools? Did they go on to earn a good living? And what is a good living? A good job is not like everything, but people do have to survive. So
Yes.
how yes.
Very impressive. They're graduates or graduates rather.
Mhm.
As a matter of fact, there is a BBC put together a film about the Summerhill School, and it's called Summerhill. You can find it on YouTube.
Okay.
And it's a real story of what happened when the British government back in the what's his name? Tony Blair was
Oh,
the
Prime Minister?
prime minister, and for a time during that period, Clinton was the president in the US, and Bill Clinton. They tried to close down the school because they could not understand how is it that you don't have mandatory class attendance, right? And how can you do that and blah, blah, blah. And they try to close it down. And it was actually the students themselves who took the British government to court, and they won in the courts. And as part of that, you start to see all of the graduates, all of the people. And as the lawyer in that case, and this isn't just a nice movie script. You can actually look up all of the newspapers and the stories and everything and the TV coverage that it got during that time, because here the students of a school that the government is trying to shut down take the government to court, right? And they won. So you can look it up all on the internet. It's all on there. But as the lawyer at that period was saying, these kids were motivated to want to learn. And look at all of the people who have graduated from this place, because they actually came out to the court trial. And you had architects, and you had scientists, and you had poets, and you had actors, and you had AI specialists and what have you. And then the lawyer said, the only two careers that don't seem to be represented at Summerhill, and maybe this is to their credit, are politicians and school inspectors.
When the students, I will watch that video, but when the students want to learn, the teachers are there for questions rather than for lessons. Let's
Yes.
say the students want to learn a certain subject and put maybe several subjects together. They're the ones that are putting subjects together to decide what their goal will be. So is that what the teachers are there for, to guide the students? The students start to ask the questions. Is that how it goes?
Yeah, to some extent. That describes more the Sudberry Valley Schools, in which there are no classes, and so the teachers serve that kind of a role. At Summerhill, there are classes, and so the teacher will be teaching about a subject, and supposedly you took that subject because you're interested in it. You're interested in science, so you took that. You're interested in knowing how to do woodworking, so you take that. And obviously it's going to go well because you're there because you want to learn something. And they're there to teach you what it is that you want to learn, as opposed to, my students constantly, look, I'm going to be a literature teacher. Why do I have to take 3 years of math? That's stupid. I'm not going to use math ever at all. And there is something to be said on both sides of that question. But the reality is that if the math makes sense, you will learn it on your own. I'll give you a quick example. When I was in high school at Gordon Tech, one day I saw a friend of mine coming out of a math class, and I stopped him and I said, "John, what the hell are you doing in that math class? I know you hate math." And he says, "Yeah, you're right. I do hate math. But I've got this beat up Volkswagen that I want to drag race on the weekend. And in math, I'm finding out how to figure out how big I can bore the cylinders on my engine block without breaking the engine block, so I can get more power on the pistons going up and down. And I'm also taking chemistry, because there I found out how I can come up with a more powerful chemical to burn, to add to the gasoline in order to get more pep in my car. So yes, I hate science, I hate math, but I will learn it because I have this other goal.
Mm.
And if whatever it is that you start off to do, I can almost guarantee you that all of these other subjects come in together. You just can't do woodworking, let's say, without understanding something about math, without understanding something about science. But when they teach you in isolation these different things, that's when the human mind just rebels, doesn't want to do it, and can't make sense out of it.
Mhm.
But when it's in the context of what you want to do, one of the other lines from that film on Summerhill, there's this one kid who is at the top of the class in science. And when the school inspector comes by, he says, "Oh, he must have been loving science for the long time." He says, "Actually, this is his first year in class. He hasn't gone to class in more than 3 years." And the inspector says, "How is that possible? He's at the top of the level nationally." And the teacher says, when kids want to learn, they go like rockets. And that's the idea behind what I consider real education, not just schooling.
Mhm. Yes, because it's at a young age, you saw how subjects taught in isolation from each other are preventing the students from putting the pieces of the puzzle together.
Right.
And meanwhile, this is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us on WZRD via Zoom Carlos Torre, an educator and oh, well, a lot more. He's just let's say he wants to help a lot of people learn better and then just change the world. Uh, and how so is it that the U.S. is very far behind in these processes in making schools better? For instance, in our neighborhood of Rogers Park, there is a grammar school, Gale School, and some people say that it should be shut down. And then, but they do have a new building. But let's say that the enrollment is going down. How are we able to address uh, helping a school in an impoverished neighborhood like that, applying these principles? It's so hard, right? Because the whole governmental structure is not there to support it in that way. How are we able to overcome it and address these problems for these young kids?
Well, oftentimes the government in and of itself, sometimes knowingly and sometimes not, is a huge barrier toward people learning or wanting to learn. Um, if you want kids to really become engaged in what they're doing in education, then you've got to have a lot more freedom. part of the problem is that because of the way we have treated these kids from the beginning, from the time they go to pre-kindergarten, they expect that they're going to be told what to do and that this is what you need to learn and you need to learn it this way and that way. And oftentimes, that's why I said a lot of my students are totally confused when I give them that project, that student originated term project. And I said, look, it's called student originated for a purpose, for a reason. Because I'm not going to tell you what you do. I don't know what your curiosities are. I'm not going to ask you to follow your passions because some people don't have passion, but everybody has curiosity. So follow your curiosity. What are you curious about? Well, if you put it that way, X, Y, Z, whatever. Okay. So follow that. What do you want to learn? I had a student one time who I think he was trying to push my buttons. And when I said what I said in class, he said, well, professor, the only thing I'm really interested in is Atlantis. And he thought I was going to say, Atlantis, how do what's that got to do with education? So I looked at him and I said, oh, that's really interesting. I'm also interested in Atlantis myself. Be interesting to find out what happened and whatever. But how can we turn this into something that's educational? Because that's the thing. You have to connect it to education. And we started thinking, and I said, look, we teach Roman mythology. We teach Greek mythology. We teach Native American mythology. Some people think that Atlantis is a myth. Why don't you treat it like mythology and see how that, can come up? And he liked the idea. At first, I knew he was just trying to push my buttons. He was just trying to be difficult. And suddenly he liked the idea. And another student said, hey, professor, I like that too. Can I join? And I said, well, it's up to him. I mean, if the two of you want to work together, that's fantastic. And they did and came up with all kinds of really interesting stuff that I didn't know about Atlantis and so on and so forth. Again, it's following their curiosity. Now, can we get that to work in a public school? It depends so much on the community, but it also depends on the administrators there. It depends on the Board of Education. It depends on the government policies. Let me just say something very bluntly. Oftentimes, the government is actually getting what it is paying for in education. Benjamin Franklin said, an educated populace is difficult to control. So could it be that they don't want an educated populace, but they need to give them something to do in the meantime? Otherwise, the jig is up. Everybody knows that this is just a big waste of time. So you come up with all kinds of things that is useless in students' lives. And you have them, that you have to learn this theorem and you have to learn that fact about history, and you have to learn all of these other kinds of things, which are essentially disconnected one from the other and not useful necessarily in their daily lives. So you go through this 12 years, and that's what you learn, that is education, and that is not education. That's what we teach them in the name of education. Getting a school like that, you need to get the parents involved. You need to get the students involved. You need to get the neighbors involved. And if it's not, if these different groups, and if these different groups don't come together to say, let's find out what is a better way, a real better way, not just a different way, then it's difficult to change a school like that. But once people get engaged in wanting to have the process be better, and they are open-minded enough to find out that there are things that can be done, including not obliging students to go to class, not all those kinds of things that sound crazy, given what we do, and that there are different ways of teaching history and teaching science and teaching all of this. I remember as president of the Board of Education in New Haven, one day I got this idea, everybody on the board liked it, and I said, why don't we invite some high school students to just simply meet the board in private, not in a public meeting or whatever. And we got our comprehensive high school here, known as Wilbur Cross. And we brought in, I don't know, 15, 20 students, and we were having discussions. And one young woman, I said, what's your favorite topic? And she said, history. I said, oh, okay, so what are you doing in history? He said, oh, we're doing the Civil War now. Oh, are you learning about what ordinary people were doing during the Civil War? What their lives were like, what their thinking and what their feelings were and so forth. And I was almost left speechless. And as you can see from this interview, I am hardly ever left speechless. But she almost left me speechless when she started talking real fast, and she says, oh no, we can't do that, because history is about important people and important dates. And if we spend time learning about ordinary people and what they were feeling and thinking and doing, then we don't have time to learn and memorize all those important people and all those important dates. And I just stopped and I said, what the hell are we doing to these students? Here, and my second question was, what's wrong with this picture? Here I am, the older person, asking the young person, what do you like about history? Are you doing this and that? And she's saying, no, we can't do that. She's giving me the older person's response. History is about important dates and important people, and we have to learn, memorize those. I'm saying the roles have switched here. They have learned from us that is what history is. And then I tried to get her interested in something known as big time history, in which you pull all of these things together. I don't think it made sense to her at the time. Maybe it does now. Big time history, I'm sorry, not big time history, deep time history. Matter of fact, on the Curiosity channel, there's a program called Deep Time History. It's got 3 episodes. I would encourage you. It's Curiosity. Curiosity Stream is the name of the service, and you can get it for under $3 a month. In any case, it starts off with the Big Bang, and then it gives you all this history behind what's going on and how is it possible. Let's say, for example, when the Europeans came and invaded America and destroyed, native cultures and whatever, and they were looking desperately for gold and silver. And I learned from that gold and silver does not come from this planet. And not only does gold and silver not come from Earth, it doesn't come from our solar system, because our sun is not big enough or hot enough to create elements like gold and silver. So where the heck did it come from? It came from a different solar system. Maybe something exploded, a star exploded, and some of it, a lot of it, ended up in Mexico in Potosi, and the Spaniards were crazy to get that stuff, and the rest we know as history. So you start to understand how all of these and plate tectonic have to do with history and the way things turned out. That to me is incredibly fascinating. But in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Big deal. What does it matter? Who cares? But pull all of this thing together. But that takes an entire different way of thinking. You have to change your way of perceiving the world.
Well, I know that you've also done work on how the colonists treated the Taino Indians, and that seems to be There seems to be pretty much what you have been describing about education in a sense too. It seems like cut from the same mold. So are there any areas in the U.S.? I see that you spoke about two examples, and were both examples in the UK, right?
No,
Summer.
one of them, the Sudberry Valley Schools started in Massachusetts,
Okay.
right here in the United States. And we have one in Connecticut, and there are several around the US, and there are many around the world.
Mhm.
So they're in all kinds of countries. There's Summerhill graduates from Japan, from China, from Latin America, from Africa, from other European countries, from America, all kinds of things. So these are not just isolated in particular countries.
How do these schools come about? Is it like you said, the community wanted them, or was it just some person that had a lot of money and saw that this was this kind of school does help the community, and the school got built and started.
Well, in the case of Summerhill, it was A.S. Neal, who's a educational philosopher. He's Scottish, was Scottish. I mean, he died. And he's essentially what is known in educational philosophy as an existentialist. So he follows existentialist kinds of philosophies that essentially say, you've got to let people follow their curiosities, and we all have it. It's built into us. See, there are in most of the world, there are at least two different ways of looking at human nature. One says that humans are basically evil, and so they need to be controlled. Another one says that people are essentially good, and they need to be allowed to flourish. In the United States, and I would say, most other governments around the world, whether it's capitalist, communist, socialist, they seem to subscribe to the same vision that people are essentially evil or bad and need to be controlled. Capitalists, well, let's say the what we call communism today, because it's not real communism if you read the Communist Manifesto, but that's a different issue. The communists try to control people with the stick, right? Prison and punishment and so forth. The capitalists try to control people with the carrot, with money, with bigger salaries, with higher positions, promotions, gifts, all of that sort of thing. But they control people because they both think that people are basically bad and they need to be controlled. So when you have that kind of an attitude, it's going to be more than swimming upstream to change things. And so you need somebody, you need groups. In this case, it happened to be an individual who got people around him to start this kind of a school and to believe that people are essentially good and that people are curious and that people by nature want to learn. And I think we've all been witness to that. I don't know any child up to maybe being a toddler who hates learning. Everybody. That's why you have to child-proof your house, because that little child will want to know if that porcelain bird can really fly and throw it in the air, and it's worth $200. Uh, so you child-proof the house. Everybody wants to learn. But if you believe that people are essentially bad and they need to be controlled, then all of those controls get in right from the beginning, and then you get it gets in so far into your own belief system that you get that young woman who said, no, we cannot teach history about ordinary people because we need to learn all those names of important people and all those important dates, etc. And we ourselves then become the barriers. So to start us, A.S. Neal was able, I don't think he was rich. I don't think he was poverty stricken either, but they got this modest building. I've been there. I've interviewed his daughter, who is the principal. Her name is, believe it or not, Zoe Redhead. And it's a modest building. They keep the costs down. Most of the teachers live right there. It's a modest house, large but modest house, and they keep the tuition low. And they have students from all over the world. So here it was an individual who was the driving force behind it, and that can happen. But in most cases today, given what I've been talking about, that the government and the entire socio-economic political structure is kind of against us, in the sense that it believes that we're basically bad and that we need to be controlled. We cannot be given this kind of liberty. Then you're going to need bigger groups, and you're going to need people to come together, and to people who understand that shared accountability. They need to understand that that if they believe it takes a village to raise a child, they are part of that village, not just the teachers, and that the neighbors and everybody else has got to be a part of all of that. We are collective learners, after all. Human beings are collective learners. We do not learn very much in isolation. I ask my students, I pretend like I don't know what the temperature is, and I need to know for some reason. By the way, how cold or what's the weather outside? And somebody automatically gets on their phone. They say, "Oh, it's 65 degrees outside." I said, "Oh, thank you so much. Now, is that your information? Did you come up with that by yourself?" "Yeah, I just looked it up." "Yeah, but how did it get on the phone?"
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then we go back and we see that there are probably tens of thousands of people who collaborated for you to know that it's 65 degrees outside, with weather balloons, with predictions, with formulas, with maps, with all kinds of things. We are collective learner. The vast majority of what we know is not in our heads. It's outside of our bodies. We're probably the only species that has most of our information outside the body.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's of knowledge, because you have the information inside your body that knows to breathe. I don't think you've been worrying about, oh, did I forget to breathe? Maybe I should do that before I keel over, right, and faint. We have all that kind of knowledge and information, but the other things, the things that we share from generation to generation, the vast majority of that is outside of our bodies, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Dictionaries, it's on the internet now. It's in AI, as a matter of fact. All of these things.
Well, even the memories, right, of the let's say our parents and our friends, that and what we talk about, and how that contributes to our experiences as an individual, and how that contributes to how we act and what we want.
Yes, exactly.
How did you end up in New Haven? What was special about New Haven that was able to help you achieve what you wanted? It seems as if like you really are you want to make the education experience better for students. And so how did you end up there?
Well, I was at Northeastern. I was a professor at Northeastern. I'm
Mhm.
one of the let's say there. I'm a co-founder of the Department of Social Work at Northeastern, along with Wanda Bracy. Interestingly, neither of us, neither Wanda nor myself, were social workers. I had done a lot of social work stuff, but I don't have a degree in social work, and the same thing with her. And we ended up in this program known as Human Services. And she and I came to the conclusion that this is not the best use of our time. Human services is so broad that it almost becomes useless. Not quite useless, but it's not as focused as it could be. And so, fixing the street is a human service, just like helping somebody get food is a human service, right? So we decided, why don't we turn this into a Department of Social Work? We worked for it. We got social workers, we recruited social workers to come and work at it. And then we actually proposed to the National Social Work Association, and they accredited the department as a social work department. So at that point, I was not even 30 years old at the time, because I
Oh,
was very young when I was I was already a full professor, a tenured professor. And I wasn't even 30 years old. So I thought, wow, so what's next? And suddenly, out of the blue, I had I had made a presentation at the Kellogg Foundation the year before, and at that presentation was a student from Yale. And she calls me out of the blue and says, "Look, we have a deanship open at Yale because the dean, just kind of left unexpectedly, and they're looking for a new dean. And some of us that saw your presentation, that sort of thing, thought you might be interested." And I said yes. And when I went there, I mean, 10 million things happened. It's a much more interesting story than I just applied. I got the job, but essentially that's what it ended up. And so the president, no, the vice president of the school at the time said to me, of Northeastern, said, we don't want you to leave, but if you just want to try this out, I'll give you 3 years, leave, and if you're still interested, you can come back.
mm,
And so that made it easy for me. So I took the job as a dean at Yale. And that's where I ended up in New Haven.
mm.
Um, and I intended to go for technically 3.5 years, because I had the 3 year leave. And then there was the summer. So that was almost like another 4 months or whatever. Um, and I'm still here, right? 30 some odd years later. So that's how I got to New Haven.
Wow.
There was
And
nothing that attracted me about New Haven, about Connecticut, just that getting a job offer from Yale was something that, you don't usually turn down.
right. Is your work in education, all these, yeah, you've been exploring this question ever since you were 8 years old. So
Mhm.
has your work been able to influence some people into uh, into bringing about a better education system? And have you seen results of your work being implemented?
Yes, I think so. There are many examples, but I think the one that pops up immediately is that my 22 years on the New Haven Board of Education, uh, we got so many things done differently. New Haven, by the way, most people would not even suspect, but New Haven is is one of the three poorest cities in the country. One of the three of the 10 poorest cities of the country, right? Connecticut is the richest state in the union, but it has 3 of the 10 poorest cities. In order of poverty, on the bottom is Bridgeport, followed by Hartford, that happens to be the capital of the state, and then New Haven. So we were basically at the bottom of the totem pole educationally and in so many other ways, but we were able to take the board and the school system, and in a few years we were able to do so many things with it that we brought it to the top. And President Obama and then Secretary of Education Arne Duncan called me and said New Haven is the model for the rest of the nation. And so Arne Duncan said, I'd like you to put together a team to go around the country at our expense, at U.S. Department of Education expense, to train other boards of education of how to do what you've been able to do. And we did. We must have done more than 650, 750 different board members from around the country, telling them how we can do these things better and different. And one of the outcomes later after that, which other people have been trying to copy as well, is the relationship that we build with the teachers union. See, the other thing that I have not said yet, but my big focus in education is relationships. I think relationships is the single most important element in determining the quality of education. It's the quality of your relationships determines the quality of your education. And relationships, again, with that village that it takes to raise a child. So the children themselves, the parents, the neighbors, the administrators, the politicians, everybody in that so-called village. And so what the union, the teachers union, is part of that village. So we had talks with them, and we invited them to, we had, some kind of deadwood among some of the teachers who were not very good, but because they had tenure, they would continue to teach year after year, and it was horrible. So we made arrangements with the what do you call the heads of the union.
The stewards? Not really the stewards, right? No.
Well, indirectly,
officers.
The president, the vice president, the other folks, and so forth. And the arrangement we came to was that we were going to put together an evaluation process for teachers, and the teachers themselves would be a part of putting together that evaluation process. So it wasn't, we're going to impose this because this is what we want you to do. And they participated in it. And because they participated in putting together their own evaluation process, they agreed that if a teacher failed that process, whether they were tenured or not, we would not fire them. We would give them an entire year of staff development. And at the end of that year, if they still didn't pass that process, then we never fired them. We just simply did not renew their contracts. And the teachers union agreed to not stand in our way, because here is somebody who we have put together all of this, what a good teacher is. And if you don't come up to par with that, we've given you an entire year of prep of education in the area. And if you're still not cutting it, then we're not going to stand against the Board of Education when they let you go. And that had never been done in this country. I thought, because we came up with that, sounded like a good idea, and that other people agreed, and we brought it into being. And then when I was talking with people in my department, and I just mentioned that, thinking, oh, everybody knows this, they were shocked. And they said, you did what? You're firing tenured teachers? How the hell did you do that? Because you couldn't fire a tenured teacher unless that teacher showed up with a 12-year-old in a motel, right? Short of that, they would not be fired, right? So then other people around the country started doing that as well. So those are a couple of things that I think I can point to, and there are others.
But how were you able to get the buy-in from the unions and even from the unions and the teachers, and it was hard even with the parent engagement. How was the board able to overcome the difficulties in getting parent engagement and the support of the union?
Well, the parent engagement was not as difficult. It wasn't easy either, but it wasn't as difficult as getting the buy-in from the teachers union, because the parents, I mean, didn't take a lot of convincing to say, look, it's your kid, right? And you want him or her to learn. And so aren't you, by the way, aren't you their first teacher? Right? Oh yeah, I kind of knew something like that. All right, so that wasn't that much of a stretch to try to get them to, to collaborate. With the teachers, it was difficult because it was not just getting the teachers' unions to buy in, it was getting the other board members to buy in. Because the board of education oftentimes would talk about teachers like they had horns and tails, right? These are devils. And then the teachers union would talk about board members as if we had horns and tails, right? And it just kept going back and forth. And the first person I had to convince was the superintendent. And I said, look, we have to work this out with the board, with the teachers union. And his response was, Carlos, you don't know these people. And I said, you're right. I don't know those people, but I think I know a little bit about people. And what everybody wants is respect, recognition, a feeling of belonging, a feeling of being kept in the loop, a feeling of being able to feel competent and reliable, and being surrounded by people who are competent and reliable, etc. And so let's approach it from that way. And he said, okay, I don't think it's going to work, but what can we lose? And it was amazing, because the president of the teachers union, who, everybody just, I mean, the joke among he was an older man, and the joke and he was kind of rough, is one of these rough kind of people. The joke among some board members was, why don't we take him out of that position and put him in kindergarten? Yeah, let's give him a kindergarten class to lead. And all of a sudden, he became the greatest ally. And we started working together on, okay, so how do we plan this out? What do? We didn't come to them and say, look, this is what we want to do in order to have a relationship with you. We want to have a relationship with you. How do we do it? What do you need? And what do we need? And that took a while, but once it got in there, as a matter of fact, when we pull all this together and the union agreed not to stand in our way if there was an incompetent teacher with tenure who we were not going to renew their contract, that was put in front of the entire membership of teachers. And it passed by something like 400 something to 37. And the real proof of the pudding, as I say, was 6 years later when that agreement was over and we had to renew it. And when it came back, it passed by like 400 something to 6. Right? Everybody was happy with that kind of arrangement because the union felt respected. The individual members felt respected. The teachers felt respected. And regardless what people say about unions, that they protect a lot of dead wood, they may, but they did not want to. It didn't look good for them to have all of these incompetent teachers. And so they were happy to get rid of them as well. And then we bring in some new teachers and we try them out, and they don't have tenure. So they'll only have a few years to kind of show what they're made of. And with that, it just made all the difference. That respect, recognition, that feeling of belonging, that feeling of being part of a larger whole. It wasn't, again, this isolation, this linear procedure. It was more of a holistic process.
Yes. Okay. It seems as if, and after that, so if we have right now, New Haven is. I had no idea that New Haven was the richest, and then these 3 poor districts were there. Was it kind of like segregation? Like, did they put public housing in those areas, and that's how the poorer segments of the population are all contained within those 3 districts?
Well, New Haven was at one time a really rich, ritzy city. If you look at old movies, you will see that New Haven is whoa, and it's got Yale University, right? The tail that wagged the dog. Huge institution, world recognized and so forth. And a lot of rich people lived here. But when industry started changing and factories started going away and the rich people started moving out, what's left are working class and poor people with no jobs, no places to work. And so the poverty starts coming in big time. And that is, to some extent, it is still kind of like that. New Haven now happens to be a majority minority city, so that between Latinos and African Americans, that's essentially 85% of the population. And then 15% is everybody else, including whites and Native Americans and Asians and what have you. So it is an interesting place to be. I'm using interesting in the broader sense of the word. But again, because we were able to do those kinds of things with the board, now the board has essentially fallen apart again. We have one mayor who came in, and what it took us 22 years to build up, she destroyed in about 22 days. Because all she was interested in was politics, money, and having the resources to do favors for her friends and people who could do her favors, right? Happened to be African American, but a lot of African Americans suffered under her administration, because it wasn't just that, she wasn't there because she was Black. She would back up anybody who could get her, more influence, more power, and so the education system fell apart, and I left the board about 3 years ago. People have been trying to get me back on the board, and I'm saying, I don't think so. I've got 10 million other things that I'm doing. And right now, I think I can be more influential outside, either writing, putting together conferences, that sort of thing, where I think I can influence a lot more than just simply being on the board. Although that was pretty powerful at the time. Right.
And is that mayor still in office now?
No, she was voted out about 3 years ago,
Oh.
4 years ago, actually. And no, 3 years ago, because we have a very unusual kind of system here. The mayor is elected for only 2 years as opposed to 4.
Oh.
And so we've been trying to change that because, the mayor gets in, starts doing some things, and then has to go back out on the campaign trail.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
So no, she's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Her legacy is still around, though.
So in other words, education is not as good as it was while the board had those changes that you helped implement.
Exactly.
Oh.
Exactly.
And
That's part of the problem. That's part of the problem. That these things, unless you have the kind of resources and influence to make them stay for a while, it becomes a roller coaster ride, or it can be a roller coaster ride. And
yes.
unfortunately, that's where it is today. It's starting to pick itself up a little bit, but it is nowhere near what it was 5 years ago.
Is your book about this subject?
Not necessarily. It's a book on education. It's I forget the title I gave it so far, but teachers and education or something like, teachers and something. The socioeconomic, political origins of public education in the US. Something like that.
That will be an interesting book. Well, Carlos, we've had a long interview. We really, really appreciate your spending so much time with us. Perhaps we could interview again about your film festival and what other work you're doing for education, as well as your book in the future.
Looking forward. Very
Thank
happy.
you.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Carlos Torre, researcher, educator, and just education and community advocate. Thank you so much, Carlos.
Thank you. And you have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.